Another critical issue is we need to feel competent. We need to feel good at things. So, of course, sport and exercise and actually eating well can bring a sense of competence if it's presented in the right kind of way. And I'll go on to talk about that in a moment. Autonomy and control is about actually being in charge of your life. So youngsters, as they get older, need that as well. It's not that I did it, it's that I did it. So it's not just about competence, it's about the ownership of the competence that's important. And that's a very subtle difference, because as professionals we can put on that white coat kind of image and claim responsibility, when our job is actually to hand it over and help other people feel that they're responsible for that success. Significance and belonging, that's friendship, okay? Having friends. And friendship and belonging, and there they are. So can we have self-esteem on a desert island? Probably to some extent, but it's not fulfilled without friendships and sharing. So children are very, very driven by friendships as well. So I'm glad I put this up, because Laurel is here in the front row somewhere. She turned up especially to see this slide. Laurel Edmonds, who did this work in 2000, way ahead of the game. It's saying, well, do we take the time to understand what children's needs are? And this is just an example of trying to understand how children who are overweight or obese are thinking. And it's not all that obvious, because we make assumptions. So Laurel took the time to interview lots of obese children, and these were some of the solutions or some of the descriptors that she came up with. I won't read them to you, but some of them are not quite so obvious. Some of them are coping very well with the situation and trying their best to find a way through. They're already finding solutions, but what they do need is assistance. And so this is about needs, particularly of an obese child. So let's apply this to what we really want from physical activity. And this goes back a while. Stuart Biddle and I wrote this in 1987, so it shows my age now. We said, really, what we want at the end of the day is lifelong physical activity. How do you get that? And we felt at the time that nobody really considered these psychological objectives. We were doing lots of things in schools to improve physical skills and fitness and so on, but not really considering the impact on the way children think and the way children think about themselves. So we really talked a lot about what this active identity is made up of and simplified it down to these two categories here. And I think it still stands. So yeah, I can get children fit. We just work them, you know. We can do a boot camp approach and really make them sweat, and I can get kids fitter in a month. But you know, they'll probably go away and say, I'll never do another push-up for the rest of my life, and that's defeated the long-term objective. So clearly what you want them to go away with is, I really want to do this on my own when I haven't got a teacher behind me kicking my backside, and that's the objective. So how do you get children to think more about that? Well, identity is pretty well made up of self-perceptions, physical self-perceptions. What do I think of myself as a physical person? Because this research we've done shows that you can predict pretty well by the time kids are 18 from their self-perceptions, in other words, what I think of myself physically, as to whether they're going to be active or not. So it's so powerful. So what we have to get is kids to identify with physical activity and say, that's for me because it makes me a better physical person. It's so powerful that it predicts very, very accurately by age 18. And it's also reflected in things like this. The one national survey we had on this, the Allied Dunbar survey, was, you know, I'm not the sporty type, that's why I don't exercise for health. That's an identity problem. Somehow parents or these middle-aged adults have got a problem that was seated earlier in life, and it's still preventing them from being active. But it exists with youngsters as well. These are kids taken around, you know, classes, so it still happens. So, is it worth it? Well, these are the reasons kids play sport and are exercising. My mates play, so it's friendship things. I want to be good, so that's achievement, etc. I'll look better, I'll feel better. It's a great crowd to be with, it's lots of fun. So obviously, if we want to create opportunities that work for all kids, we have to create these kinds of feelings in youngsters. These are reasons they don't want to do it. I'm useless, self-perceptions. It'll make me look muscly, girls say that, beliefs. I'm not the sporty type we've had, I always get left behind, I'm too embarrassed and so on. So we've obviously got to avoid these kinds of sensations for youngsters. And a lot of them are seated in, well, this is about understanding. Obviously we want kids to understand good reasons to be active as well. So many parents and teachers tell kids they've got to be active because I say so. But kids need a good reason and they need to be convinced of that. A lot of the motives are self-based. Does sport or exercise make me feel good? Will sport or exercise make me look good? Will it help me get on with friends? Does it give me status? Does it make me feel embarrassed and incompetent and stupid? So they are self-referenced, many of these feelings. And I'm rushing through this now because there's a lot to get through. So if we look at this thing called physical self-worth, these kinds of constructs make up what physical self-worth is. So we've got to promote good feelings in these categories for youngsters. But I can tell you that actually some of them make youngsters feel bad about themselves, body image particularly for young girls. But sports competence can make youngsters feel bad about themselves if they don't feel they have it. And what's the best strategy to get that out of your system? Well, then you just push aside the importance of sport competence. You say, I don't care if I'm no good at sport. Leave it alone. I don't care if I'm not fit or I'm not an exerciser. Leave it alone. It's not part of my self-esteem structure, then I'll kick it out on a limb and I'll not be bothered about it. So it's possible to remove some things from your self-esteem system if you don't feel competent. Actually, that's a very healthy strategy in terms of mental health. Unfortunately, we want to see kids committed to sport and activity, so it's important to us to help them avoid that. So can I do it? Is the left-hand side of this equation. It's much more difficult for us to get all kids to feel good about their competences physically, because it's very public, you know, people can see whether you're good or not, and so we have to, and of course there's a whole huge variety of levels of ability in youngsters. There's two 14-year-olds I took in a class of mine on the left there. How do you create opportunities for both those kids to feel good in basketball? Right? Well, you can. You've got to be inventive as a teacher. You've got to be a good communicator as a parent. And, you know, you can if you talk to them in the right kind of way. And I wouldn't have taken that photograph if it wasn't the case. So that's the challenge. And I would say that you need a mastery approach. And some of you would be familiar with this. But it's theory arising through the 80s that we adapted in exercise and sport. It's actually using mastery and task orientation, so focusing on the fact that you can master a task and that you are better than you used to be. Because it doesn't really matter where you started off on the scale then. If you started off as a very sitting down person, then actually moving to becoming a walking person makes a difference, and you can get a sense of achievement from it.